Hello everyone, welcome to the next reading and writing lesson in the Take5SAT 5-week study plan. Today we will tackle the first actual reading question type within the domain information and ideas. This lesson and the following one will tackle the skills, central ideas, and details. We'll go through the technique to solve the central ideas questions first today and move on to the central details on lesson 9. The central ideas question can be spotted by looking at the question in blue right here. When you do the reading and writing SAT questions, it's a good idea to read the question first before reading the text so that you know what type of questions you are being asked and to navigate what kind of skills you should use to save time and maximize the result. When it comes to the proper technique to solve the central ideas questions, we first need to revisit the concept of main argument. We do not want any vague guessing when it comes to doing the reading and writing questions in the SAT, so make sure that we are on the same page with the College Board about this idea. So technically, main argument consists of two parts. The first part, the topic, is usually what you can see as a noun or the subject that the passage is talking about. For example, the topic is about food or the tribal culture or the World War II. This is usually very easy to guess or to spot, and a lot of students can do this really well. However, the topic alone would not be enough for the main argument because let's say if we talk about the topic food, there are many ways that you can write an argument or a paragraph about it. 1. Food is getting more and more expensive. Or 2. Nutritions we need on a daily basis, as in you list down examples for that. Or 3. New lab invention allows making soft gels of protein as an alternative source for whey protein. Therefore, to tie it up, we need a so what. This is the second part, which usually be seen as the verb or the adjectives to show the description for the noun or the topic. So, for let's say this example one, the so what is getting expensive. For this example 2, the so what is necessary for daily diet. And for this example, it is getting innovative thanks to science. Now let's go back to the previous example to see what the main argument is. First, the topic can quickly be spotted by scanning the first part of the paragraph. We are talking about a specific Japanese artist referred by her name and then using consistently the pronouns she or her, so we can quickly jot down the topic as this Japanese artist O for abbreviation. Now, to find the so what, it may require some carefulness while remaining one-pointedness in finding the description of the topic. Trying to find an exact action or characteristic of this artist, famous, admired, calligrapher, but also a writer and a ceramist, multiple jobs. So what does she do? She blends art forms, or in here, inscribes her poems in her own calligraphy or onto clay vessels. And specifically, this is a pretty unique and distinctive art form. So now we know that the main argument of this passage can be stated as the topic or this Japanese artist O, and the so what is famous with a distinctive art skill. Simple as that. No need to remember all details of her jobs or her art technique. But you do still need to understand and read through that part to be able to summarize into this main argument. Another good discipline to take is to check for the ending sentence of this paragraph. Usually, not always, you will find the conclusion that ties up the entire paragraph together, or it is paraphrasing the main argument. Check if it aligns with your own argument. Here, the author presents the topic dark matter along with the so what, which is it is invisible, but it must exist right at the beginning of the first sentence, devotes the following sentences to explain how scientists arrived at that conclusion, and then reiterates the main takeaway at the end. When the point is presented this clearly, you may find it helpful to highlight it on the screen. Another example for you to try, feel free to pause to think before seeing the answer and explanation. We see that the topic is the Clovis people, and the so what is new evidence shows that the first inhabitants of the Americas were not Clovis people. So the trick lies in the last sentence, that even though the entire paragraph talks about the Clovis people or the first Americans with evidence like artifacts and stuff, but at the very end, the author introduced a contradiction showing that the previous findings were either false or outdated. This is a very typical SAT reading paragraph to trick students. So, tips. Pay attention to transition phrases. If you need some revision, go back to lesson 7 on transition to revise on transition group, especially to find out the contrary group. For the science topics, look for old versus new ideas, which is usually represented by the use of old or outdated or false findings before introducing the news and updated ones. What is the old and new ideas here? Can we spot it? We can spot for old and new ideas quite easily here by paying attention to indicators such as time. So the old ideas usually are presented with a historical timestamp like since the 1930s or in the 18th century, etc. While the new ideas are usually marked with in recent years or today. Second cue is some verbs like thought or believed. They would be used for old ideas, while new ideas often use verbs like found or discovered recently. And usually, third cue, the most important indicator is the bridge between the old and new ideas, which is usually a transition or a conjunction to show the contrast of the two thoughts. Here, it is marked with but. The previous examples are all science or non-fiction passages, which usually has a clear structure to spot the main argument. However, a lot of students struggle with reading comprehension when it comes to fiction passage like this one, because they are usually full of detailed description with no clear structure, making the main argument finding quite difficult, especially for ESL students who are not used to reading such materials. So the tips here is to ignore all the description and focus only on the course of action and the emotion. We see that this entire part of the paragraph shows a lot of course of actions of the work in the ink making studio. This part talks about the history of the business through generations. You do not need to focus too much on understanding each specific task or each specific evolution of this ink making business. And the last sentence gives us a peek of emotion from the great granny character. Bragg and ink palace indicate the pride she feels about the family business. So we can jot down the main argument, something like this family business have made ink through generations, and they are proud of it. So now answer C gives the correct paraphrase of this main argument. Carefully check if the passage actually shows the role this character plays, because most of the pronouns we saw in the passage is we. But there is a me right here showing this character's role, just like Gowling and her aunts and cousins. Answer A gives just half of the passage because it ignores the part about the work they do and how they feel. Answer B, on the other hand, focuses on the work they do but wrong emotion and introduce new ideas that are not included in the passage. And answer D gives the wrong emotion. Admiration is correct, but not towards her relatives, but rather the family business, and also there is no disappointment here. Another type of non-fictional passages is poetry, which can be more tricky because the literal meaning may sometimes not be directly stated. A poet may convey the central ideas indirectly, using images or metaphors. At the same time, however, you cannot go too far outside the bounds of the poem and make assumptions that are not clearly supported by the specific wording in the text. This text right here is divided into two equal parts. Each consists of 4 lines. The first section, the speaker describes wanting to study and record the actions of admirable people. Then, in the second section, the poet indicates the intention to look beyond people's surface qualities or superficial actions, like the beauty of their face, their pretended grace, when assessing who is beautiful. As a result, we could say that the main idea is that the speaker is uninterested in superficial characteristics or wishes to portray people who are internally beautiful. Knowing this information, we can find the correct answer, which is the paraphrase of this main argument, which is D. So the tips to deal with poetry question is to divide it into sections by looking for the period or when a full sentence ends. Then summarize each section to capture the main intention. Intention can be an action that may or may not happen, or maybe something that a character wants to do. Other than intention, look for emotion to capture the underlying meaning of the author. Another version of the central ideas question is to identify how passages are structured. This is grouped within the same type of skill because in order to identify the main argument, you also have to go through the entire passage with one question in mind. How is the main topic described? That means what actions or verbs and characteristics or adjectives are used to talk about the main topic. Answering this without drilling into the detailed description requires students to see the big picture. How are information developed and related to the description of the main topic? This is the equivalent of understanding the overall structure of the passage. Let's take a look at a fiction passage example here, and we will see another example to find the structure of a non-fiction passage later. In a fiction passage like this, remember the tips to focus on the course of actions and characters' emotions. We see that this character, Gordon, performs a chain of actions. He arrives home, enters his house, checks to see if there is a letter, and not find it. How does he feel about it? Disappointed probably, because he told himself not to hope, but continued to hope anyway. It's not very intense because it's a stale feeling, not quite a pain. And the only thing that makes this character happy or the evening bearable is to find a letter from this Rosemary person. So this passage main argument is something like this. Gordon was disappointed not receiving a letter from Rosemary even though he hoped for it. And the overall structure of the passage to develop this main argument is a chain of events leading to not seeing a letter arrived and how the character reacted emotionally. This is usually easier for a fiction passage to see the structure and a bit more difficult for science readings. We will see one such example later in section 5 put together. Now going to the answers elimination step. Answer A, B, and C all describe the wrong chain of event. There's no repeated failure in receiving letters, even though it's tempting to say that. In the last sentence, the passage told us that he received few letters, but this is not consistent with the main argument. There is also no explanation why it has not been sent, even though it's tempting to see this part that said Rosemary might have written, but it's not an actual explanation, more or less an emotional reaction following the disappointment of Gordon. Answer B and C also gives us wrong event. Since Gordon was not unable to enter home, he in fact did enter his house, or he didn't receive any letter to have a happy reaction. So D is the only correct answer that reflects the events. He hoped for a letter, but then found himself disappointed when there's no letter. Let's put all strategies and tips we have learned so far together. This first example is a fiction passage. Remember the tips to do this? Follow the course of action and the character's emotions or reactions. Do not fixate on every detailed description. We see that the character Mrs. Penniman is described as a widow with some physical traits and something about her characteristic here. She is amiable or friendly, very gentle, and has a taste for light literature. She is quite indirect and obscure, but in a foolish way. We also see that she has a passion for little secrets and mysteries, not very honest or not very veracious, but again, we get reassured that it's just innocent or impractical things. Here, adult X is a figurative speech for confusing and useless things like rotten eggs that won't hatch. So, no bad intention nor consequences because this character has nothing to conceal. Or maybe she is just not that malicious or evil. So, by describing her characteristics and her little passion, we know that the main argument of this passage is that Mrs. Penniman is a foolish and innocent character with some indirect and dishonest defaults and hobbies, but nothing too serious. So, let's go select the right answer that reflects this. Puzzling and mysterious sound really tempting, but she is quite foolish and innocent, so it's not the right answer. Passionate reader of novels is also incorrect. We only know that she has a taste for light literature, but not entirely a heavy reader. We also don't see her as a difficult person to get along with, even though it is tempting that you, readers, associate her characteristics as such. But it's not what this character is about. It's not what the passage talks. So D is in fact correct. She is actually romantic and sentimental because this associates with having a taste for light literature in a less intense level as the passionate reader, and sentimental here is also a correct description for her high standard of gentility. It's quite a hard read with a lot of advanced English vocabulary, but readers can still see from the overall passage that this character is light-hearted despite some silly, mischievous traits. This is a good example to see why sticking to the main argument or the overall structure of the passage instead of focusing too much on details is an essential reading skill, or else we will be tempted with how much we are given about her mischievous passion, and we might think she is a mysterious and puzzling figure like answer A.